My name's Steve Doyle, I'm the Invigilator today. We're going to talk about some pretty cool stuff. Thank you all for coming and sharing some time with us. What I will do first is just introduce you, or ask the panel to introduce themselves, just to give a bit of background on who they are and what they do. So, after you, sir.
Okay, Nick Cudahy at All Response Media, head up the digital strategy there. I'm one of the board directors.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I am Director of Engagement at an agency called Dialect based in San Francisco. We specialise in working with high-tech and video games clients.
Hi, I'm Alex Hawksworth. I'm the Head of Data and Technology Strategy for Group M, looking at trends across the market and trying to work out how we guide our agencies to best service our clients.
And I'm Keith O'Reilly. I'm Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Bionic, and we build ad tech primarily focused on measurement and attribution as well as optimization.
Brilliant, thank you guys. So what I'll just do very quickly before we get into the meat of the conversation is just to sort of give you an overview of what this session is going to be about. So integrating data from major customer acquisition platforms in order to accurately attribute revenue to marketing activities remains a major obstacle to success for advertisers today. The inability to unify conversion data along with various marketing channels is a real challenge. This session we're going to attempt to explore that in a bit more detail and look at some of the ways that marketers are looking to lead that challenge. So, let's talk about that challenge in a bit more detail. At first, Lucy, talk to us about how you're overcoming that at Dialect.
So, I think for us, it's a massive challenge. It's a huge challenge. I think, we have a lot of clients who are selling both on their own kind of owned properties, but also through third-party sellers like Amazon in the US, like Best Buy, Newegg, and actually being able to model all of that data both at a retailer level, but also at a media placement level. It's becoming incredibly complex. And I think, we've built models to try and allow us to do that, but it is, like I say, getting all those data points in, really understanding the interrelationship between those data points is getting harder and harder and harder.
Absolutely. And Nick, in terms of online and offline, how have you guys looked at that at ARM?
Yeah, so as an agency, we operate through the line, and I think one of the important things that we want to focus on is not just how we can attribute across digital channels, but actually the impact of offline media within those digital channels. And something we talk a lot about is if we can understand that better than our competitors and our clients' competitors, then we can get a strategic advantage on that. What we found with this type of challenge is that we can actually model things like TV data and digital data really effectively, but as more and more that digital data becomes harder to extract from these walled gardens, it's actually limiting our ability to do that, which is therefore not just a digital problem, but also actually an offline strategy and media problem.
So Alex, deep within the bowels of Group M, in the dungeon, what are you saying?
I kind of wanted to pick up on what Nick was saying, and I think we're seeing a huge battle at the moment, especially across the change in browser policy, across the legal legislation that we're seeing with GDPR, which is starting to reduce the digital signals that we have access to. And it's quite obvious that the cookie is starting to become a non-dependable indicator of things like measurement and conversion. And at the same time, I think there are indications to suggest that things like mobile IDs will also have to be changed or adapted. So as we see these pools of measurement data start to dry up, deterministic data becomes enormously important. And we see that within a lot of the walled gardens, but is it the best thing for any single campaign to move all of your spend within a walled garden? There are benefits to it, but there's also still a lot to be said for. And we have to remember really, really clearly that conversions that aren't tracked can still be conversions. There's still conversions happening even if you're not able to track that data. So the true value of those conversions will be lost if you move all of your spend or you start to shift your spend into the walled gardens. You need to work out a way of segregating and choosing different methodologies for analyzing the data you get from different sources. So whether you're looking at certain browsers that redacted cookies or browsers that have got cookies, you have to apply different methodologies for that. And then to try and generate better data for this, I think the models are enormously important. We need to find better ways to do that. We've seen interesting things with things like passive audio conversion, which allow you to do things like track exposure to any kind of media that has audio tracks within it, and then convert that into geolocation data to see store visits. These are new innovations that are really going to help us drive the ability to understand what that online, offline conversion path looks like.
Excellent, thank you. So that's sort of outline of the challenge. Next we move on to what we do about it, how we address it. Keith, maybe you'd like to share some insight from your angle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the challenge of how the different channels interact and connect is a minefield, to be honest. So what we do, our business is about building tech to solve problems, and in particular marketing problems. And one thing we've seen, while we can talk about where the future's going in terms of cookieless and different technologies for tracking, there's a real opportunity now where people are spending a lot of time working between different platforms. They're tracking campaigns, spending a lot of time managing campaigns between different platforms. They're then reporting in each individual platform and not seeing corresponding numbers that make sense. So a lot of duplication, a lot of overlap, and a lot of the different channels are claiming credit for that conversion. So what we've done is we built a solution that allows us to integrate the two big boys of the marketing world, Google and Facebook. And we've helped those two platforms work really seamlessly and closely together. So we allow you to build a campaign in Google, traffic it to Facebook, then optimize on Facebook based on those signals and performance as Google sees it. So pulling those two big boys together.
Excellent, thank you. So Google and Facebook covered off with Bionic. Lucy, I know you had some stuff you wanted to talk about with regards to what you guys have been doing with Amazon in particular.
Yeah, so we're really lucky that we've been working with Amazon in the US on a beta attribution program, which allows us and our clients to look at view-through sales across the board. It doesn't really matter where that media is placed, apart from inside the closed gardens of Facebook, and allows us to track the effectiveness of that media in terms of delivering sales. And it's really transformed the way that we think about media placement, really transformed the way we think about optimization. The real killer for us, though, is that there is no integration with Facebook, which has this kind of gaping hole inside our data pools. So, as I said at the start, we model. But at the moment, we don't know how effective that modeling is. So we don't know what we don't know, right? Which is always the killer when you start looking at these big data sets. I think that beta is now available in the UK. It's in closed beta at the moment, but it has, like I say, been really transformative for us. And just being able to see that data flow into the Amazon e-commerce environment has been a game changer for us and our clients. I think one of the bigger challenges we also face is when we're looking at the broader retail market, is how do we then start to tie that together with online sales? So for us, in the US example, it's like, how do we track what's happening in Best Buy? How do we track what's happening with those smaller kind of bricks and mortar stores? So I think the next stage for us, and the part of the program that we've just kind of kicked off with Best Buy in the US, is going into store and starting to actually talk to customers about how they're getting there, and starting to kind of bring that offline data into the model as well. But yeah, it's been a great program, and a program that I would really encourage people to get involved in the UK. But yeah, it's thrown up that even bigger and the problem that Facebook still are blocking that integration.
Yeah, it's that single view of customer that we've
Absolutely.
talked about for so many years. It's actually starting to
and
become,
we're so close that it's just still not quite there.
We're nearly there, aren't we? We're
Yeah.
kind of
Nearly there.
20 miles out of 26, so to speak. So Nick, All Response Media, the agency with a clue in the title. How are you guys addressing this challenge? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so as the name suggests, we're all about performance, and that's what our clients challenge us with. And probably like many of you invest most of your media budget into either Google or Facebook or both, and there really isn't the option of picking one or the other. You have to do both. We went through. We really tried to tackle this problem because I think for us it drove two major issues for the agency. Firstly, it drove siloed behavior. So we had Facebook having their own numbers, their own performance metrics, start to spin off conversations about Facebook was delivering X, Y, and Z, and then would have the same conversation with the Google buyers. And for us as an agency, as a performance specialist, we've got to have one single view of what's driving performance. Otherwise, we can't have those valuable conversations. I think the second thing that it caused at an agency level was the challenge around what is driving incrementality. So we're trying to have these conversations on whether we should drive more money into television, into Facebook, into Google. With this separation of the data, it's really hard to have an intelligent conversation with that. The way we were trying to attack the Google and Facebook challenge was with DoubleClick, or GMP as it's called now, which is our usual default single source of truth. And we were manually creating click tags at a really granular level, manually trafficking them in Facebook, and then we'd go through a laborious data matching exercise of pulling the data from DoubleClick, pulling the data from Facebook, and then identifying which tactics, creative, etc., was working. And to be honest, that was suboptimal for ourselves and for our clients. We threw that challenge over to Bionic, and essentially they've automated that whole process for us, and that's great because we save stacks of time, we reduce the chance of human error, which is always a good thing. But ultimately, what the kicker was, we were actually able to optimize Facebook to DoubleClick numbers, and that's really what we optimize all of our digital campaigns to. And what that drove was, I think, one, a much more valuable conversation with our clients, but we were actually able to identify the incrementality, so we could start to see that journey from those two different platforms, and then we could make better decisions on that. There are still limitations. Obviously, Facebook are not sharing all of that data, but for us, that drove quite a significant improvement in performance and the ability to scale wherever that performance was.
Thanks, Nick. Pretty comprehensive there. So, Alex, you've obviously got a huge organisation a huge oil tanker to turn in terms of how you adopt tech and make the change. How have you adapted that with the vast number of clients the Group M have?
So I think we've always been the case that each of our agencies takes a very close look at each of the clients they have and tailors the approach as closely as they can to the needs of that client. And we've seen the rise of the stacks recently mean that there is a level of homogenization in the technologies you can use, but I think there are always innovative solutions outside of those stacks, which are enormously interesting for us, and we constantly make sure that we're testing and iterating with those technology partners. I think one of the most interesting things we've seen recently, and it's just landed, is the rise of the single ID. So the Trade Desk is talking about its unified ID. We have ID5 with their solution.
Yeah.
Digitrust is also establishing an ID, and if we could have a unified ID that steps across the rest of the ecosystem, then maybe that would encourage some sort of sharing from the walled gardens to create a pool or a single point where we can manage that. And actually, this speaks really well to the privacy element of the problems we're seeing in the industry at the moment. Because of the huge amount of use of JavaScript and pixel matching that happens, there has been, as we've seen, a turn in people's attitudes towards privacy. GDPR is a symptom of that. We can also see it through the browser policy changes. If we can find a way for the industry to agree on a single managed token, I think the IAB recently suggested this in their enhanced accountability post that they put out there, and it was in a controlled manner, audited, and then also within a controlled environment for delivering advertising. Then it means that we could have a single point rather than many thousands of different tracking tokens for any single user. I think that would be a utopia. I'm not saying that's going to happen overnight. In fact, chances are that private entities are more likely to come to market with paid-for solutions first. But it's a move in the right direction if we can incorporate the privacy attitudes of the public along with the efficacy of the conversion and measurement that we need to do. And if we don't wake up to that now, we're going to find that measurement is degraded over time. Whether it's the public cookie, the third-party cookie, and over time that will become then also relevance on your mobile IDs, and then possibly even looking within deterministic data and how people share their data with the sites they log on to. Because people can become very aware of their privacy. We have to work with people to respect privacy to enable us to be able to get the level of efficacy we want out of the industry.
I was going to ask you about the death of the cookie, but then I realised that was a whole other panel all on its own. So
don't start me, Steve.
No, I'm really not going to. So that's kind of the challenge we see. What we're doing today. What does the future look like? Keith, you don't get called a chief product officer with having some insight into the future. So what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years? How are we going to address this and move forward with it?
Well, I certainly would agree with the majority of what Alex has said in terms of the requirement for a single identity. I think, cookies are invariably being deprioritized at whatever point they go away. I don't know. But I guess wearing my, Facebook partner hat, the other side of it is they would see themselves as operating on a person-based or a people-based basis. So rather than a cookie or rather than a device, they represent people. And I think that's likely to be a growing trend. Even Amazon perhaps can represent the household rather than the user. So I think what you could have is some sort of peaceful coexistence between an outside walled garden and then a within walled garden, maybe some sort of handshake between the two. But I think that will take time. And I think there will... I don't know if I can see that far in the future, actually.
Check your watch.
But I believe there will be a lot of, and there needs to be a lot of coalescence in the private publishers outside of those walled gardens. So maybe there'll be cooperative data walled gardens for the non-Facebook and non-Googles. But I still think the silos will exist. And from our perspective, purely from a selfish integration perspective, making walled gardens and third-party entities play nice together is what we do.
But then how do you manage the issue of translation from the walled gardens onto the actual e-commerce sites? You're going to lose that connection if you don't have a third-party cookie or some sort of identifier to link that. Link decoration's been taken away. The ability to use first-party cookies has also been redacted on certain browsers, I admit, but I think we're likely to see that spread. I think we have to have something that joins them all together, and the walled gardens sitting apart doesn't necessarily allow for that.
True. It's true. But it's not me you need to convince on that one.
Yeah, I agree. Exactly. You're talking to the wrong person. So, Lucy, Dialect are a Silicon Valley-based business. What are those guys in San Francisco saying to you about how this is going to shape up in the future?
So I think for us, in terms of the way that we plan and we execute media for our clients, we're already moving to a much more contextual-based approach. I think that really is, for us, with the clients that we work with, they're very niche, they're after a very specific target audience, then that is a lot easier than for us as an agency than lots of other agencies, that facing a similar challenge. I think, for us, one of the things that we're going to carry on investing in is our data and our research centres. So for us, it's about understanding multiple different touch points. So, how are users moving? And it's not just about how they're moving from a walled garden to a endemic games publisher into Amazon. It's how they're moving across device as well. What are the different touch points as they're going through their sales journey? Are they just consuming video on YouTube, or are they hopping onto Games Radar to look at an article about, performance of that particular mouse or that particular keyboard? It's really understanding the complexity of that user journey, being able to track the user through those different touch points. And if we don't have the ability to have a kind of a single ID, if we don't have the ability for Facebook and Google and everybody else to talk nice, then we need to be, I think, as an industry, starting to look at how we model that data, and as an industry looking at the interdependence of that customer journey. So if we're saying that Facebook has, should be taking 60% of the sales that we're reporting, is that fair? Is that where we should be? So I think, as an industry, we need to come together, better understand what different agencies are doing, but also I think, we need to carry on investing in the data and the research. And I think critically as well, and I know we were talking earlier about, e-commerce still being a tiny percentage of all the sales that are happening both in the UK and Europe, but also on a global basis as well. How are we tying that offline data in? And I think it's very easy for all of us here at AdTech to be talking purely about an online environment. There are billions of pounds and dollars worth of money that we're missing, and we are influencing those sales. We absolutely are, and we need to be able to understand if we're really going to grow ourselves as an industry, if we're really going to be growing Dialect as an agency, then we need to understand the influence that we're having on driving people into store and being able to account for that as well in our ROAS numbers.
Okay, so Nick, you're a smart cookie, you've been using Bionic. How are you going to advance that in the future? How are you going to roll this sort of stuff out to get even more information for your clients?
So I think just building on Lucy's last point, completely agree with the offline, the physical retail being a key data point, but actually what we're foreseeing is obviously the digitization of what we called analog media channels. And I think that's going to bring in some interesting dynamics. So even with the measurement we have today that we do at the agency, we can see a change of TV call to action have a fundamental impact on search and social performance. And that's probably at the bleeding edge at the moment. I think with the digitization of these channels, with whether that's through the buying of linear TV changing to a more of a programmatic model, what we're actually going to get out from the other side is actually a much more digital, many more digital signals. And I think that's going to create an interesting dynamic, because there's some major media players who live and exist in that world who will be coming up against the Googles and Facebooks in their territory. And I think that I worry that adds more complexity and that makes the solution further away.
Yeah.
But actually, what it might do is bring marketing departments closer together. We have less of this as being just a digital conversation and much more of a C-suite level business conversation. And maybe that can affect change from that top table.
Any thoughts on those comments?
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree that this digitization is really important, but I do think Lucy has a strong point in the fact that there is a vast amount of money out there. I don't think that it's something that we can't manage. I think traditional linear channels are comfortable in the way they measure themselves at the moment, and probably to the digital acolytes, I mean, maybe that isn't quite the level of rigorousness that we expect.
Yeah.
But I think there are ways that we can start to step that. And I think very interesting point that Nick made, which is we need to break down those silos. We've found that there are ways actually for us to measure and quantify to a certain extent TV impacts. So we run a couple of companies that help us to analyze exactly when TV spots ran, and then we run a baseline uplift study on the actual digital properties that our clients have. So we can understand when baseline is increased from a TV spot, and we look at like the next 2 or 3 minutes rather than any more than that. Yeah. So it's very granular, and it's understanding the uplift that we've had kind of delivered by that. Now that's a homebrew solution that Group M have built. I know there are other solutions like it. But these are the kind of innovations that help us to start doing things. We're also looking at a partner who does the passive audio recognition, so they can observe from somebody's mobile phone that has a background app that runs incentivized. They can then tell when somebody's been exposed to a TV, an online video, or a mobile video ad, or even a radio ad, and what they do afterwards. Whether they then go into store, whether they actually visit the store of bricks and mortar. If you can turn that together with point of sale data, then you've got the wonderful trifecta of being able to look at that full thing. I'm not saying that's easy.
I think for me that is absolutely where we need to be. Is that pulling in that point of sale data, and I think however we achieve it, we need to be moving in that direction. I think just kind of quickly to make the point about the kind of almost the de-ghettoization of digital. I think that is happening. I see it a lot with my clients. I'm seeing increasingly guys who used to be digital now moving into those CMO spots. Yeah. And I think there is a far greater awareness, certainly kind of within the clients that I work with, of the fundamental impact that digital is having on everything. And I think clients are pushing back as well. And I think it's talking about how we break down those walled gardens. I think as well, if the really big advertisers are pushing back on those walled gardens and saying, come on guys, you've got to start giving up some of this data. I mean, I know in the US that was one of the reasons why Amazon capitulated and started their program there, was just the strength of pressure coming from their retailers and the manufacturers. So I think I think collectively we all need to be putting the pressure on from a client level and agency level to be able to get those walled gardens to give up that data.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a huge trend in omni-channel retail. So we're seeing retailers not just thinking in terms of online or offline, one or the other, but a kind of unified view. There's a lot of initiatives within the walled gardens as well as outside of those to collect external data in. So capturing IDs around loyalty cards or a payment on your device, or even till-free and checkout-free retail. You're seeing a lot of merges of those two types of retail. It's just retail now, and everything's digital. And we're seeing huge investments in that. I think that's an interesting point. I think the more that happens, and if the walled gardens can demonstrate the value that they give, then there's significant leverage for a retailer to influence the channel to cooperate.
And it works in their own favour at the end of the day, right? Because if they can prove the massive part that they're playing in an omni-channel world,
it's good,
then the investment flows, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, we're just about out of time. If you want to come and see us at the Bionic stand, clicker will click D73 just down there. Do come and see us if you'd like to have a bit more of an in-depth chat. Thank you very much for spending some time this afternoon. If you wouldn't mind giving a hand to the panel for their wonderful contribution, that'd be fantastic. Thank you very much.